Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hi. My name is Monica Miller, and I am the guest curator of Superfine, Tailoring Black Style. And also, thank you. Yay. And also a professor of Africana Studies at Barnard College, Columbia University. On behalf of the museum, it is my pleasure to welcome you tonight for a conversation to discuss the process of making Superfine with artists Torkwase Dyson and Tanda Francis, who will join me on stage soon. The exhibition and its accompanying publication would have not been possible without the generous support of numerous organizations and individuals. Our deepest gratitude goes to Louis Vuitton for their lead sponsorship of the exhibition. We also extend our thanks to Instagram, the Hobson Lucas Family Foundation, Africa Fashion International, founded by Dr. Precious Malloy Motsepe, and the Perry Foundation. We are especially grateful for the continued commitment from our long-standing partner, Condé Nast. Superfine, Tailoring Black Style, presents a 300-year cultural and historical examination of Black style through the lens of dandyism. The exhibition is inspired by my 2009 book, Slaves to Fashion, Black Dandyism and the Styling of Black Diasporic Identity. It explores the significance of sartorial style in shaping Black identities within the Atlantic diaspora from the 18th century to the present through a range of media, including garments and accessories, drawings, paintings, photographs, film, and more. The exhibition interprets the concept of dandyism as both an aesthetic and a strategy that allowed for new social and political possibilities, demonstrating how one's self-presentation is a mode of distinction and resistance within a society impacted by race, gender, class, and sexuality. The process of making Superfine has been a paradoxically long and short process, especially for me as an academic. The process has been long in that I began the research into this topic, or the topic of Black dandyism, over 30 years ago as a graduate student. It has been short in that the typical time from inception to opening for a Costume Institute exhibition is much shorter than that, about a year and a half. Therefore, the translation of my book into an exhibition has been well prepared for and also like a train moving quickly out of the station. Historically, dandies are famously men of parts. They are, according to one 18th century writer, like fops, their precursors, and this is the writer, the offspring of more than one man's labor, for certainly no less than a dancing and a fencing master with a tailor, a milliner, perfumer, peruke maker, and French valet de chambre involved. A dandiacal exhibition like Superfine also has many parts, as I came to learn as a guest curator. Legions of talented, professional, creative people contribute to the whole, among them a curatorial team, a design team, an editorial team, exhibition managers, conservators, installation managers, and technicians. So the making of a dandy or an exhibition on Black dandyism is nothing less than intentional, meticulous, fabulous, and a spectacular group project born out of a collaborative and creative process. Part of the work of the Costume Institute's curatorial team is to identify and work with an architect for the exhibition design, and sometimes to think through other artistic collaborations that might enhance and deepen the show's meaning and impact. As many of you know, or hopefully have or will see, the exhibition design for Superfine, as well as the mannequin design, is an integral part of the experience of the exhibition and its ability, I think, to convey what many people tell me they feel in the gallery, a feeling of emotional intensity and fullness or soul. I turned to artist Torkwase Dyson for the exhibition design, or we did, because her visual language echoed the lyrical, descriptive language, or one of the reasons, because her language echoed the work of a titan of African American literature, Toni Morrison. Dyson's shape language, which she'll explain, evoked for me a number of moments in Toni Morrison's work which concern the visceral relationship of Blackness, race, space, and soul. Those of you who know Morrison's novel Beloved will remember The Clearing. And this is Morrison, a wide open place cut deep into the wood that nobody knew, where baby Suggs, one of the novel's matriarchs, a formerly enslaved woman who cares for her community's spirit, preaches. In The Clearing, Baby Suggs instructs and encourages all of the formerly enslaved men to dance, the women to cry, the children to laugh, and after they enter the space, she says, "Here, in this place, we flesh. Flesh that weeps and laughs. Flesh that dances on bare feet and grass. Love it hard. Yonder, they do not love your flesh. They despise it. Flesh need to be loved. You gotta love it." For me, Torkwase shapes both create and contrast spaces of vulnerability and others that hold, contain, offer, display, protect, and reveal Black people and their history. Like Morrison, she attempts to manifest and account for, again, this is Morrison, the breadth of the disremembered and unaccounted for. If one of the goals of this exhibition was to think deeply about the relationship of Black people to dress and adornment, one of our other concerns had to be the actual display of these garments in the exhibition space on mounts, dress forms, and mannequins. Given that Superfine is the first menswear show at the Costume Institute in about 20 years, and also the first to center Black men, commissioning a new mannequin was necessary. Costume Institute curator in charge, Andrew Bolton, saw Tanda Francis's work and was so moved by its monumentality and thoughtfulness, the way in which her design practice is also about memory, connection, humanity, and heritage. Tanda's work asks a question that both provokes and haunts people of African descent in the diaspora, a question first famously articulated by Harlem Renaissance poet Countee Cullen. What is Africa to me? Given her ingenious use of narrative and books as design elements that emphasize story, character, chapters, and parts to a whole, which she will explain in a minute, her Superfine mannequin is one element of a much longer lyrical answer to the question of the place of Africa and people of African descent in the world. I'd now like to introduce the extraordinary Superfine artists more formally, and then bring them into the stage in a minute. Tanda Francis is a Brooklyn-based artist with a primary focus of creating public art, including monumental African heads. Her work addresses diasporic African people who are too often underrepresented in public art. She sees the rituals and customs rooted in a spiritual and ancestral past as a significant means of understanding and addressing the contemporary and future condition facing humanity. She uses her work to activate a dialogue of universal origin to cross cultural barriers. Francis explores digital and traditional forms of art while working and exhibiting her art in solo and group exhibitions locally and internationally. She has created several site-specific monumental public art pieces, including Biggie in Brooklyn and New York, Everyone Breaks at Riverside Park, And We Breathe at Van Cortlandt Park, Take Me With You at Socrates Sculpture Park, and Adorn Me at Fort Greene Park, Brooklyn, among others. Torkwase Dyson's abstract works examine the history and future of Black spatial liberation strategies and grapple with the ways in which space is perceived and negotiated, particularly by Black and brown bodies. She has distilled a vocabulary of poetic forms to address the spaciousness of freedom and question what type of climates are born out of world building. Dyson has held one artist exhibitions at the New Orleans Museum of Art, the Serpentine Galleries London, Hall Art Foundation, Schloss Dernenberg, Germany, Mildred Lane Kemper Art Museum in St. Louis, T-Space in Rhinebeck, New York, and Brooklyn Bridge Park, among others. Her work is held in notable public collections, including the Art Institute of Chicago, the Hammer Museum, the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the Studio Museum in Harlem, among others. Please join me and welcome Tanda and Torkwase. Each artist will say a bit about their process, and then we're going to have a conversation. Thank you.
have the remote. Hi. How's everybody doing? We're good? I'm Tanda Francis. I've been introduced really well. I don't even know what I'm going to say to you right now after that. Like, enough said. Thank you, Monica. So this is what I do. I do African faces in public spaces. And yeah, right? It's not really like, we gotta be out there, right? Like, you know, after all, come on. So this is a piece that was just mentioned in Fort Greene Park called Adorn Me. And this piece is, I call this piece my very elaborate selfie. Because I decided to focus on like my alter ego and decided to then kind of multiply it and have it in this public space. It had to be my alter ego because this is a very public site, and it just felt way more comfortable to put an alter ego onto it. So I started to do these things where I was grouping images in order to like kind of get a message across. And a lot of people look at this face and see 3 different separate faces. This is from one mold repeated 3 times. And depending on its location, it kind of takes on a different feeling. If it's in the shadow, if it's under a tree. And something that I've noticed is also happening with this show, with the Superfine show. This piece is called Rocket Black, near and dear to my heart. I consider this to be on tour right now. It's currently in Venice. And for me, it takes off and lands and collects voices along the way. I focused on local artists. With my public pieces, I always want to do kind of like an intro to local artists and kind of have them presented in a digital format on the piece. And that piece is now in Venice, and this next stop possibly Shanghai. You know, you guys follow along, you'll see where it goes. And the open book aspect of this, it appears, you see the faces emerging from this kind of the center point in this piece. And for me, it just says a lot about the potentiality of the other spaces that are not being focused on at that moment. And for me, it really says a lot about kind of coming together and like a community aspect of it. And I'll tell you a little bit of background on this piece. This piece was made from collected wood from Worthless Studios. We're collecting wood from the storefronts that were boarded up during the Black Lives Matters, during that those protests. And the businesses boarded up their stores, and eventually they felt the coast was clear and just like it was gonna go into the landfill, and Worthless Studios Plywood Protection Project collected the wood and requested there to be a statue made, and I made this piece out of it. I made a rocket. And I was, yes, right? I know! And this is around the time where like Bezos was like shooting off into space, escaping Earth, and all these people were like, I'm out. And this is a very grounded rocket, a very black and very grounded earth-to-earth rocket. And I was just like living in that kind of like, this is how I speak about this. You know, because this is powerful. These pieces, I do these public pieces, but the fact that they're in public, it's not about just having a piece that's in public, it's about the interaction of the pieces, and how people can feed into it and like it can go out there. Like for this, the radio station had 5 artists that I focused on for Rocket Black. I want to grow that. And right now, those 5 artists, that site, when it's activated, it's 5 artists that are in another completely different community that's going to be exposed, and then it keeps moving. And okay, well, let's. I know we don't have that much time. So this is my inspiration for the head and for the Superfine show. So I read Monica's book. So thought out, so like there's so much in this book. Like I had no idea. I read the title and I thought one thing, and then I read the book and I was like, oh, wow. I just didn't know, like the origin of like this dandyism and how it kind of like expressed and why it was what it was and how it kind of feeds into what we are today. So that was really like very interesting, very interesting to dive in there. And then I started to see what was going on in the Congo with Andre Matsuwa and the sapeurs, and the culture is just like, I couldn't look away. Like, I couldn't look away. It was just beautiful, and people were, when I start talking, I feel like my chest needs to go up a little bit more. Like, people are like, will dress for their life, like it's their life. Like, it's not just like something superficial, it's what they're about. And they'll put on an outfit and like stop traffic. You know what I mean? Like, purposefully. Oh, let me go back to Andre Matsuwa. Like, he's the first person to take the colonizers' clothes and use it against them. This is what he did. And he started this culture of using, that's what they did. That was the purpose of, like, you know, it was a way of fighting back and like really like, and looking good while you're doing it. And they would just be like, you know, stopping traffic. For too long. You know, it's like for too long, and it was like, wow, they just do that. This is a performance, and this is a purpose. It even could be like it's even like supports them, but it's like no matter what, it's the fashion is what they put on and what they use as for purpose. So I was like, okay, let's go. So I started to work on it, and the interesting thing is that I worked on it in wax. Usually I'm using another material. I'm usually using plasticine, but it was very, like, I wanted to be able to leave my studio. I have a studio, there's no windows. I have a kid, where is he, by the way? Hey, there's Kai. And it's like, I would just be in, like, I really get into my work and I can just be in it like for too long. So one way to escape is to put it in my bag, and like the wax made it like really possible to be potable. Like, you know, just to take it with me. And I started to mix the colors. It was kind of interesting, the kind of that direction to actually like have this control over the colors. So, oh man, I didn't warn you. Sorry. Okay, so this is the current project that I'm working on. This is a public statue that I just won the opportunity to be able to present to the world and to the diaspora, because that's what this is. This is like, do you see those faces? I don't know if you can see all those little faces. Like, usually I'm focusing on one, and then I decided to, I was inspired by the graphic that we usually have of this, like, the slave ship and all the people in this vessel. And they're just nameless and anonymous. So I decided to pay homage to those lives by putting them into the plinth of the piece. And that head that's that's larger in scale is represented, it's the first African American. I was actually focusing on Isabella, his mother, and it became like obvious that it was not the mother that I was sculpting, and it became William Tucker, which is the person being represented in the piece, and his mother became represented on this head as a vessel. And all those heads are there. They are all meaningful to me. So I'm glad to be able to be talking to you guys, because you get the word out. Like, those pieces, those are all potential stories that I want to get out and want to be impregnated into this public piece that's going to be in Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia, in the next couple years. And yeah, if you guys, my social media, I'll definitely be getting the word out on Tanda Francis, at Tanda Francis. But yeah, it's something that it's big. When I realized, when I looked at because I carried around with me, and I looked at all those heads, and I was just like, oh shoot, that I spent a lot of time on one. So this is a community piece, just like in the Superfine show. The idea of having that, the reason why I was like, yes, we're gonna do this like several faceted heads, because those stories of the sapeurs, they're coming together in community. And their performances is in community. So I just wanted to state that in this show. And just the way that we came together to do this show, and all the different parts coming together to make one thing that we could have never done on our own. Like all those like special little details and everything that all just came together by, like a great orchestration, just like good intentions to do something beautiful. I'm just very happy to be a part of. So yeah, I think that's my last slide. Yeah, so.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Monica, as always, for having us. It was such a pleasure to work with the Fashion Institute and the museum and think about and form in relationship to Superfine and the trust. I want to thank you for the trust you had in me and my practice. And I loved being sort of thrown in to an institution about and for Black liberation, and asked to swim, asked to find myself in a system that was already being built so beautiful by your book. So one of the first ideas I had was to think about modularity, migration, and something so beautifully written about in the show is how Black people liberate from the Caribbean, from Virginia to New York. And I wanted to make sure that the work I did with the geometries I culled from the book expressed that expanse. So one of the first slides I have is a piece titled Way Over There Inside Me. And I wanted to start the conversation with this piece to talk about what does it mean to understand the expanse of interior Blackness, and then make from that space. In response to someone asking you, hey, make a space for something I know deeply. And even though we had just met, and I was learning, like everyone else, the expanse of dandyism in Black lived worlds, it was so timely, right, to think about how to create what I consider a sort of force multiplier as exhibition designs go. It was my job and SAT3 and other collaborators to make sure we made a space where the force in your work and the other curators' work could have its way in the space. So, as we define the work, I was really, like yourself, reading and trying to follow along with the histories that were global, economic, spatial, small and large. And so scale became a real thing. And the first moment I found out that any kind of ephemera from Du Bois was going into the show, I felt transported in some way. So my mission began to be led by a sort of host of ancestorship that I didn't know. But during the drawing process and the sculpting process, I think I built courage, but I also built experimentation and risk. So that's what has come about. So, thank you.
Okay, I have so many questions, um, and I'm not exactly sure how to bring them all together, but I'm gonna spitball a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna actually start with a question for Torkwase about a question that you actually helped us on the curatorial team think a lot about, right? You work in what you call hypershapes, so I want you to say a little bit about that. And I wanted you to say a little bit about how you modified those shapes for display, right? That is not something that your sculpture normally does, right? But it's absolutely something that it had to do for this exhibition, right? And we talked a lot about, I'm gonna mash up two questions, right? But we talked a lot about initially on the curatorial team about the variety of garments and objects that would be in the exhibition. And particularly, we were thinking about the garments that were either worn or made by enslaved people, and the ways in which we needed to care for those garments, in particular their display. So can you say a little bit about the thought process around that, and even some of our conversation?
Sure. I think inherently there was a challenge around forming something for the display of Blackness, which also has its violences and its enclosures and its dispossessions. So I immediately meditated on not recreating a space of enclosure, right? And not recreating a condition of stagnation, and not recreating a condition of a subjective dispossession, right? So principally what happens with the hypershapes is I pull from different architectural histories, infrastructural histories of Black confinement, right? Whether that's the ships and the hulls from the transatlantic slave trade, or the history of colonial architecture. In these spaces, Black folks find both small ways, quotidian ways, everyday ways, but also phenomenological ways to transform themselves into freedom. So I knew with hypershape as a principle and a sort of guiding principle to say, okay, I'm not going to recreate enclosures, that there had to be multiple throughways, there had to be multiple opportunities to have different kind of dynamic perspectives. So in that space, drawing sort of took me to it, right? And as I'm drawing with the hypershapes and thinking through your book, I discover this idea of display and how to refuse it, right? Because these bodies were on display, they were commodities, and they were material. Paradoxically, embodying that commodity and with, I would say, abstractions, one can redefine itself inside the system, right? In these sort of stealth and overt ways. So it was the absence of spectacle in those liberatory moments, but inside a larger spectacle, which was display, stage, theater, right? So thinking about display, theater, stage, those environments where Black folks self-liberated, I wanted to bring those shapes into the conversation of hypershapes. And I had never thought about the stage or the aperture as frames that then I would pull and create hypershapes from, but the way in which you transverse these histories through these frames allowed me a way in, right? So then I took the form of the stage, I took the form of the aperture, and then began to reproduce, make, mold, elevate, change, abstract those forms, and then I came up with the shapes.
I mean, I often, when I'm giving tours, right, I often really, at the very beginning of the exhibition, we point out the kind of camera aperture. I mean, for some, often when I mention that and people can see it for the first time, something really clicks, right? People really, really understand. That wasn't meant to be a joke, but thank you. Right? People really, really understand the way in which, the tension around Black representation that you're talking about, right? That has to do about the ways in which people have been captured, right? By, say, cameras, photography, right? Documentary photography, anthropological photography, right? And then also the ways in which the camera has also been a technology, right, of self-fashioning, right? I mean, a primary technology of self-fashioning. So it really, really comes together. Tanda, I have a question about mannequins. One of the things I was thinking about, right, is that mannequins are often, and it's actually kind of an opposite question than the one that I just asked Torkwase. Mannequins are often supposed to be ideals, right? They're meant to be universal and ideal, right?
Yeah.
So when thinking about the mannequin for Superfine, I'm struck by two things that I want you to say a little bit more about, right? One of them is the way in which, and you can see this, I don't think you can see it on the image, one of the images that you showed, but the mannequins not only have an abstracted face of Andre Matsois, right? But they also have a line on the side that is meant to represent a mask. So I want you to say something about that, right? And then I also want to dig a little bit deeper into the panel heads, right? Or silhouettes. I'm not even sure. We call them all different kinds of things, right?
I should probably settle on something too.
Yeah, well, it's okay.
I call them silhouettes mostly,
But when thinking about both the mask, right, and the multiple silhouettes around the head, right, I mean, I'm interested in how you see that in relationship to whatever ideal or lack of ideal you were going for with the mannequin, right? And just how are those things all working together?
Okay, yeah, so I guess I will just talk about a few elements, and hopefully I can answer your question in the mix, the question in the mix. The silhouettes came from like this kind of Victorian illustration, the shadow drawings. That was the origin, and I started to use them as books as well. I just like the idea of that flatness of it, and the fact that they came from that era. I thought about the fact that we were not represented in the way that we weren't full people. We weren't represented as full people, and I thought it was interesting, that flatness, that is kind of like that such a bold image, but it's all this information is taken away. Okay. And so there's something about the contrast in that I like. I'm a Libra. I don't know, that's gonna mean something to somebody out there, but like, I don't want to choose. I just want to try to strike a balance between those contrasts, and that was a part of it. And the fact, those images are definitely something of an ideal, like this kind of beauty forms. The silhouettes. And with mannequins, of course, they're idealized beauties that also, they take away information now. That more minimal or modern mannequins take away a lot of information. And it's meant to be like, just like a person, a beautiful person, but a person. Yeah. And this project was for me to like bring attention to a specific person. Yep. So I kind of like thought it was interesting to have it, the idea of Andre Matsois emerge out of a mannequin. Like there's the back of the head, it's really a mask that I've done, and with the silhouettes, but it's emerging from a mannequin. Like it's coming out of something that was there, and it's merging into something else. Like I was thinking a lot about like different dimensions and like portals. Like in the Rocket Black piece, that oval shape for me is a portal. And I just thought about the kind of like emerging into the space. Also, the other piece that I have, you can't see it in the image, but the piece of Tucker, the boy who's the first African American, he is emerging from water. Like there's a head, and you can see there's a line. Can't see the detail, but it's like he's merging for water. So my idea is to show that kind of aspect of simplicity and kind of a transition into complexity. So that's really what that is about.
Yeah.
Still having the beauty there.
Yeah. I mean, Torkwase, what you just said about sort of simplicity and complexity, one of the things that really struck me, and that continues, that somebody just asked me about the other day when we're in the galleries, right, is the relationship between the different structures in the exhibition, right? The exhibition has 12 sections, and each section has its own architecture, right? And I know that for you, because you're so interested and actually committed to thinking about spatial liberation, right? Can you say a little bit about how that worked for you as you were plotting like the room?
Sure. I often start by mentioning the 10,000 square feet,
Okay.
right, of that room. It was huge. And how do you take something, I've never worked in a space that large. I've never deployed hypershapes or abstractions in a space that large inside of a building. So thinking about an architecture that would talk about freedom was another leap, right? So I started to compartmentalize and break things down via scale, right? So I knew that I had an idea of a few of the objects that were to go inside, but because it was an overall, you all needed the design before the completion of the curatorial selections. So I set up a system, and in that system, I made sure I had 3 things that teach me about the history of freedoms in these architectures. So I set up an elevation drawing. So I knew that I wanted the space to feel sliced and fragmented, and then sort of put back together. So you have different elevations that could host the different scales of the objects that were going inside. And oftentimes, when I'm in the drawing process and I think about scale, I want it to be elastic. And so thinking about scale, elasticity, and the unfixed and the indeterminable, I knew that I could depend on the history of these practices of self-fashioning to think about improvisation, especially off the stage, right? So the context of how dandies become a dandy, how they transform themselves into dandy, and the breadth of those registers allowed a sort of improvisation as well. So I had that going for me. So I set up a system with the hypershapes. I knew I needed a sort of improvisation. And I knew I needed elevations. Now I just needed a sort of force, right? So I drew out the shapes, and then I organized them and I kept redrawing them and then made a way for them, right? So after those sort of drawing in that sort of improvisational way, I spent a lot of time listening to Cecil Taylor, right? So I'm trying to push and pull from basically 4 shapes. And then, we talked about this, how can, as Blackness as a sort of acrobatic thing that's both haptic and seriously surreal, right? And thinking about those registers of intimacy and phenomenological logic. So, geometric abstraction helps in that way, a history of that, in these moments of encounters when you're moving from section to section to section. So I think that kind of process and practice helped deal with that 10,000 square foot space, right? So, and then one last thing, I'd worked up to a point, And then our collaborator, SAT3, came over and worked with you all closely, locking things in. And because they had such a fidelity to my practice, it was magical watching them sort of take the space to another level of exhibition design. Because I don't make design, I make sculpture, I make poetry, I make paintings. So, in working with the team, and also I heard a lot of the feedback around how do people move in space and how much floor needs to be allotted. And the museum had, I would say, limitations that caused expanse, right? So yeah, making sure there was enough circulation room. I didn't want anybody to, I wanted the errantry piece about it all.
I mean, it's amazing that you say that, because one of the things that people don't realize that you mentioned, but is really, really true, is that we were working on the curation, right, at the same time that you were designing the space. So the process is incredibly iterative. I mean, unbelievably dynamic, right? And the way that you talk about your shapes, I mean, this is you talking about them, expansive, improvisational, lyrical, intelligent, demanding, and then the system that you designed, you describe as acrobatic and stealthy, ethereal, and monumental. And I know that's a part of your process in general, but it was gonna have to happen anyway, right? Because of the ways in which that you were responding to the ways that we were organizing the exhibition. You know, we were adding, we were cutting, we were taking something out, adding something in, and just the flexibility that you had, right, as a result of the modularity of your design, I think really, it was demanded of the process, but you already had it, which was really phenomenal, right? And really, I think, shows up in the exhibition and the way that you talked about multiple registers, the way that people feel there's an expansiveness up, right? Which really, again, that's where the spirit is, I think, right? And that's I had a spirit question for you, Tanda. You say you put African heads in space, right? Tell me why heads, right? I mean, I want you to say a little bit more about that. And then also, when you mentioned at the beginning that the one piece that, the piece about adornment, that people think it has different, it's different faces, but in fact it's one, right? That is something that we hear every day in the exhibition, right? In terms of the way that people encounter the mannequin. And I just want you to say a little bit more about how that works for you, right?
Okay,
and then you know what it is that you want to communicate, right, by focusing on the head.
Well,
how the mannequin takes
very good
advantage of that,
question.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It was
Yes.
a good situation.
Yep.
Yeah. So I focus on heads. But first of all, I fell in love with the Ife heads of Benin, the kind of bronzes that are, they're human scale, like a little smaller than human, but human scale. And I decided to do that at a larger scale. Like, I wanted to, I'll get to where that was going to go in a second. But so their belief is that the soul of a person is in the head, and everything else is just it doesn't matter, and that comes across in the artwork. And I love the idea, and I just kind of like, I kind of like to focus on portrait. To the head. It's something that I just like to do on top of it. And then to have it already be something in our culture, I thought it was like, it just felt like that was something that I should focus on. And I love doing it because you can really tell so much by just the head. You can like just you can even suggest the body, what the body is doing by what the head is doing, by what the head looks like, the way it's positioned. So there's that. And the first time I did monumental head, the first time I did one for a public piece, happened to be in front of Trump Place. Yeah, in Riverside Park, which is, it's in front of Trump Place, and I had this available to me through the Art Students League, and I got this site, and I was just like, this was 2016, and I'm like, what would be good there? It's like, you know, it was a crazy year for like the election cycle, and I was doing this like graphic, geometric metalwork stuff, and I didn't decide between the two. I decided I wanted big African heads, like right there, because that was, for me, the collage that was needed at that time, was to have that presence in that, around that name. I don't know why, it just became something that was struck, and I was like, let me do that. And I put them together, like you could, it's these huge, it's a 21-foot piece, and these heads are floating in space, and they're cracked on their surface, and they have this kind of like Japanese, like, I'm gonna butcher the name, kunsinki, golden mending on their, between the broken parts. And I started to do that, and I just didn't want to stop. I really like working with that form, the heads, and being able to tell a story from that is great. It just feels like home for me. And did I miss another? I think that's everything.
No, I have a follow-up though. One of the things that I often mention, and I was wondering if it resonated with you, is I often talk about, when I introduce people to the mannequins in the exhibition, I often talk about the ways that your pieces are often sited near water.
Yes.
Right? And for me, not only is it the ways in which the silhouette heads are mirroring a book, right, and creating a kind of shared narrative within the exhibition space, but also the water piece, right, in terms of the way that I feel the pieces that you're working with outside of the museum are really connected also. So can you, did I get that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely,
Okay.
you got it right. I mean, it's something that is happening. It's, there's a water story. This is why the Rocket Black is now in Venice.
Okay.
Because, you know, the goddess of water, I'm like, oh, we got a goddess over here, let's get to, I don't know, that was my shorthand of saying it. I just felt that I wanted to follow this water story. So I was in a show in Venice, and I decided to bring the piece with me. And you know, I really feel like it must be on tour because of what I explained before. So it's the water aspect of it, again, with the other piece where there's lives, many of us in, you know, underwater, lost. There is that piece. There's Adorn Me is now, it used to be in Fort Greene Park, and it's now at Exchange Place, which is not too far. It's like right by the Statue of Liberty. It's actually looking at the Statue of Liberty. And when the piece ended up in this site, I had no idea of the history of this site. But it turns out that site was a major hub of the Underground Railroad. So the piece is really, it continues to speak about the history, our history. My work is about that. And that's just what I'm doing, is just putting like note in a very bold way. And the fact that I didn't know why that piece was there, and now I do. You know, it just says, I mean, I'm keeping it simple. I focus on the head, you know, and and you know, I kind of need that also to be able to like to be able to focus and to be able to work well. It really helps me to know that I can communicate what I'm supposed to communicate, what I'm here to do in that way.
Another kind of what seemed like a simple aspect, but for us was not, when we were thinking about exhibition design and the relationship between the design and also the mannequin heads, is the color, right? People also ask questions about the galleries in terms of, you know, the darkness of the space, right, as well as the color of the mannequins. So Torkwase, can you tell us something about the color of the space?
Sure.
Long
We
set
went
of
through
conversations.
quite a journey
Yes.
over color. And I stepped in this thinking that I needed to, turn myself into Yinka Shonobare, right? I needed to have color and texture and meet the garments, meet the livery, meet the top hat, meet the zoot suit in the design itself. So I spent, I don't know, maybe a month and a half trying to bring together color and, bring together what was not something that I work in my practice. So through the process, you all liberated me from that.
So curious. I'm so curious. What
Yeah. I had
you have
polka
sketches.
dots. I
Gotta see
had.
that.
I mean, it was something I was trying to figure out, I guess. But yeah, we stripped that down and back, and a lot of my work. One of the things I know now about color and what it means to, this idea of value and currency, and thinking about how do you, in the sort of capital colonial project, and how to drain value from a thing, right? And for some moments, I was thinking, well, color adds value. Color adds value. But I think bringing the tone down and bringing that color down, for me in my studio, took away a kind of violent value. So the darks that I usually use in my work are usually very dark blues, very dark greens, and I work my way to a darkness. Very seldom do I use, sort of a flat black. So thinking about moving towards the sort of value system in the gallery not only allowed a more organic process from the garments and the curatorial process and the fashioning and the designing, but it allowed me to, what I say, form, fashion, forge, right? When I did not have to think about color outside of my own personal meaning, right? I could allow myself to let that go and let the curatorial work do its magic in terms of color, encounters, relationships, right? So thinking about it, value, tone, tint, and then allowing the sort of lighting design to sort of carry contour lines of black into different shades of brightness, and then hit the luminosity, right? And then hit the transparency and the reflections, right? And then the fabrics. So my hype around, oh my God, I'm not a designer, I think I should do everything in color, went to texture and the haptic and, how the haptic can create a condition of perspective, and how transparency and opacity, we're talking about glissant here, is also a way to think about liberation and what people have access to and not access to. So it was a journey, right? But we got to a good point. I hope I answered
Exactly
your
right.
question.
I mean, you
Okay.
also say in a different place, which I think may actually be something that unites the two of you. You said, "Black is my freedom to move and shape, like conjuring and refusing at the same time."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I must say that when you spoke about the clearing
Yes.
and transformation and baby Suggs in the clearing in the day, those same things happen in the evening, right? When the sky is blue and the stars are out, there's, metamorphosis that happened in different registers of light. And it was that sets me free. That sets me out to not have to think or worry about color, but think about distance and perception and space and the ocular brutality that I'm fighting against in relationship to the constructions of slavery, right? So what does it mean to really focus on Black braining, seeing distancing, and the sensoria that happens when all the lights are out. Right?
And I know, Tanda, that you were really interested in, we have one more question after this, you were really also interested in thinking about, it's so great that you mentioned the Benin bronzes, because part of the effect, right, that you're thinking about with the mannequins making them gray, right, had to do with trying to evoke a metallic, right?
Yeah, I wanted to feel like not so separate from these bronzes that I'm putting out in public spaces. And those are inspired by the Benin statue sculptures. So that is something that has just been a part of my work for a while. And interestingly enough, I've been sculpting in the dark often, you know, and I didn't realize the space was going to be as it was in shadow, like with these shadows. But for me, it helps in my, you know, I worked in my studio and I also worked in my home, and my home has a lot of light. And sometimes you're not able to see the piece when there's a lot of light around. So it's interesting that sometimes I have to go in like the bathroom and like with the light, a cell phone or something like that to see in a different way. And I think that might be, and because I would think about a particular shadow and then work on it, and then I think about another shadow and work on it, and that could be what's going on with the different, the way these pieces start to look different depending on the light or what's around it, what it's wearing.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, that's the interesting idea of like, you know, kind of like working with the blackness of it. And yeah, I also always think it's kind of like interesting how that word has been like used against us in this, and we've been using it in the opposite way, because it's like beautiful, it's great, but it has this like this negativity attached to it. Tension, yeah. It's interesting living in that and working with it.
So I have a question that's now for both of you. I'm really interested in, because I think I was there possibly, right, when you saw the exhibition for the first time, Torkwase, right, when you entered the space, when everything was installed, right, and before it was open to the public. And so I want to ask you both what that experience was like, and then also what you learned, because you two, we were working very closely with both of you, but you were not working together. So what did you learn about each other's work as artists, right, from seeing the exhibition for the first time?
Again, I guess it's the first time you're doing this where it's exhibition design, right? I know you've done public sculptures, so I just thought it was, I kind of didn't know about the camera as well, and the ideas of the extent of like how it's used to be, the form and a space can be used to liberate. Like that is, you know, or to work against confines. I mean, that's a challenge, because we're confined in this building. So your willingness to go into that kind of space, to the depth and the possible destruction of figuring things out and making it work, and having it come to the point where it looks like that, it's
with no models.
With no what?
No models.
With no miles.
No models.
What?
Sorry, like no models.
Models?
I don't know.
Jeez, no, what, just drawings? Wow, nice. Because you were saying that, because she was explaining, I'm like, wait, so you're doing drawings. So then I was like, okay, but then there's a model, but there's no models. Interesting. Okay. Wow.
Digital, yeah. No physical models.
No physical models, but a lot of drawings. I would love to see the color drawings.
I don't have color drawings.
You
They're
said
graphite.
something about like working through color. I'm like, what?
Oh,
like,
with fabrics. Like I had.
Oh, with fabrics.
The poor curatorial team. Sorry, William and
so
Kai.
I don't know. I'm learning this now.
I brought in like stacks of fabrics.
Oh.
I went to Joann's.
But then there's. But then, you know what that was? You were trying to take on too much. Oh my gosh. Because just like there's too much. Like I'm so glad you got away from that.
Distillation.
It must have felt great.
Yeah.
And there was something else I was gonna say. It'll come in a second, but yeah, that was just like that was a lot. And then you gave yourself more work by adding levels. Because you're talking about the amount of space, but if you split the levels, you're just doubling it.
Well, yeah. But
Okay.
I'm good with height, though.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not shy around height or distance or scale. I'm not shy around.
I
I
love
am
those
shy
pieces
around-
that are like there's every time they're in height, they're very striking. Like probably hard to photograph, but they're great to be in the presence of.
Yes,
So what
they're
was it
hard
like when
to
you got in
photograph.
there?
Oh.
What was it like when you got into the exhibition first time?
Thinking about, it was beautiful. That's what actually honestly thought. It was beautiful. And I thought that I felt cared for and held by SAT3. I felt like the lighting designers were visionaries. I felt that I had worked at my capacity in relationship to time and space. And then the thing that I had done was taken to another level with people who are inside the institution, but I didn't feel institutionalized, right? There was so much back and forth. So I just felt, and I felt amazed, and I thought the lighting was perfect. It was just incredible. But when I started really coming, when the show was being installed and watching, I call them the ninjas, but watching the preparators place things and care for things, my anxiety sort of went away, and I felt that if this is the kind of collaboration that helps people feel good about their looking, I'm very excited. Now the angst or the anxiety were the mannequins, because I don't make things for people to inhabit them necessarily, right? So I don't make figure. I'm not pointed towards figuration at all. And I consider most of my work throughways, right? Portals, things that refuse enclosures. So it was pretty magnificent. I'm still learning from it. Like we talked earlier, I still go and I still think about drawing from sculpture and making sure that I listen to people as they watch and see and how they respond, and of different ages. So I really, really enjoy listening to the audiences as they come and they say and they speak. So I feel beautiful. I feel like I was a part of something beautiful.
Same here. I actually when I walked into this space, I didn't know that I was walking into the space, because there's the back door. We went in through the back doors. So Joyce, she didn't tell me that we were. I think she did it intentionally, so that I can just happen upon it, and it was a great idea because it shocked me, because before then I just had one, and then I walk into the space, and they're all just looking at me. It was like there's so many of them. I'm like, what? So I was like, I actually just stepped back and I turned around, because I was like, nope, look, it was too much. It was a lot suddenly, so I had to pace myself, pace what I was seeing. And I turned around, and they were still, the ninjas were still at work. The ninjas were still at work. That's a great word for them, I love it. So they were still dressing things and setting the space, and it was just wow, this is definitely happening. So it was a shock for me, and it was everything that you said plus the shock, I would say.
I didn't think that they were going to let me get away with so many things.
They didn't
But when
put
I
any
saw the
restrictions.
mannequins,
Was the what?
I was just saying, when I saw the mannequins, it's like sky opened
Like-
up.
yeah, and also like this would be everywhere, and they would just like be together, you know. So yeah, it was just a shock, and yes, I didn't feel like, I mean, I feel like I can just do exactly what I wanted to do, which was really cool. So from that head in the space that you visited, when you guys visited, it was really funny, because I had edited it before they got there, and it was like, oh no, you don't know, but I was like, so I edited something, and I had to fix it, and then it was just a process thing, but you guys came right up to the process. It was really real, but it worked out. Good edit, very good edit, by the way. But yeah, it was just the whole process. This process has been good in that I feel like that I can express exactly what I wanted to express, and it came out like beautifully. So yeah, it was great to see it. Like it finally, just like it was a breather too. Like because I wasn't sure exactly how the faceted heads were gonna look with clothing, because I'm not in the fashion world. And it's kind of thrust me into it, like in this situation, right? Yeah. But so it was amazing, like the way it was styled. The curators did an amazing job, like in like the way what they chose would have the faceted heads. Just everything is just super fine, just great.
Okay. On that note, I think we end and say thank you very much. Thank you both so much for your collaboration and your care.